During the Wednesday General Committee meeting at the City Hall, Barrie City Councillors have approved a motion to review right-of-the-way road standards for land in South Barrie. The motion will potentially make future streets narrower in order to increase pedestrian and driver safety by adding a bike lane at the same height as the sidewalk. Councillor Sergio Morales from Ward 9 proposed the motion. It includes reducing lane size on minor and major collector roads, providing space for school drop-off zones, and building bike lanes that are separated from the road at the same level as the sidewalk. Ward 1 Councillor Jeff Lehman supported the motion, saying that narrower roads are cheaper to build and have better drainage, which helps the environment. Mayor Alex Nuttall said that while he was a councillor, he moved a motion to support balanced growth, which was written by former Mayor Jeff Lehman. The motion will be considered for final approval at the March 29 meeting.
The first item that was held this evening was, I believe, by Councillor Morales. It's the zoning bylaw amendment for 680 Lockhart Road, Phase 2, Ward 9. Councillor Morales, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just wanted to start by...
Could you put the item on the floor?
I'll put on the item on the floor as printed.
Thank you.
I'll speak to it first. Okay, so now that it's on the floor as printed, I just want to say I'm supportive of this proposal. It's a good complementary mix between the existing lower form density and some of the higher form densities that we're seeing already approved on Yonge Street, by the way, and in the south end of Yonge Street in my ward. I believe up to 11 and 15 stories near Lockhart, and 7 stories existing by St. Peter's, so it complements well. And they've also, the applicant has also found efficient built form types. Gone are the days oversized backyards, and there's a more focus for people-oriented density. Why I wanted to hold this, and I've talked with staff and Mayor Nuttall, you know, with others, is this primarily is affecting Ward 9 and Ward 10 right now. It will affect Ward 7 in a couple of years, but I'm going to move forward an amendment, and it's not to the actual development. Again, the development is great, but the reason why it's going to be acted upon now is that this development essentially is going to construct a new road that doesn't exist right now. And we need to just make sure that we're right-sizing our roads, and that includes the asphalt itself and possibly the right-of-ways. But a more comprehensive look has to be looked into. So I'm just going to read the amendment now. I believe I've sent it to the clerks, and they can flip it to everybody if they haven't already. So the amendment reads as follows: that in order to increase pedestrian and driver safety alike, staff review the right-of-way road standards for the Salem and Hewitt's zone areas, including the possible reclassification of roads to account for differences between existing roads and roads yet to be built, and report to Affordability Committee. Space, including a reduction of lane size on minor and collector and major collector roads from the current 3.5 meter standard, earmarking immediately in front of schools enough right-of-way that allows the possible construction of school drop-off zones, even when the right-of-way is lower for the rest of the road, bike lanes that are separated from the road asphalt, and at grade with a sidewalk on minor collectors, major collectors, arterials, and intensification corridors. And finally, the use of multi-use paths in substitute of sidewalks where appropriate. And I can speak to the amendment, Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Members of council, we all have these roads in our wards, and they're frustrating, they're dangerous, and they're the kind of feedback we get at the doors of, can you do something about it? And sometimes we can. We could put a speed bump, we can put a radar board, we can pray, we can hope. But the real solution, especially on streets that have yet to be built, is to design it properly from the beginning. And for myself, those 2 streets in my ward are Country Lane, Loon Avenue, for the most part. And I know in the north end, I'm thinking off the top of my head, Livingston West is one of those. Cundles, St. Vincent, Livingston East. These are frustrating streets that have similar oversized, essentially, asphalt, which is the road portion, and we can do whatever we want. We can put paint on bike lanes, which, by the way, are not safe for cyclists. They're just kind of a Band-Aid solution. We can do buffers, but it doesn't address the actual width of the road. Now, in discussions with staff, obviously we have a priority to preserve as much right-of-way as possible for various purposes, including utilities and in school zones, addressing this in the future. So I wrote this motion in consultation with many people to try to find a balance and allow flexibility to occur. And members of council, if for those that were on council the previous term, map, and I don't really need to send this, but map 5 of the official plan that we approved has all those little color codes of where roads are going to go. Some are yellow, some are blue. And it shows the right-of-way and the meters. And essentially, when I look at this subdivision, and why I'm piggybacking it onto this application is I was going to say the extension, the construction of Moberly Road. Right now, it's a farm field. And Greer Street. If I wasn't moving this amendment, members of council, and if we didn't do a comprehensive review, the future roads in Ward 9 and Ward 10, and eventually Ward 7, will be built to the same standards as Loon Avenue and Country Lane. And I in good conscience, I don't think there's been an issue that I've been that, like, this is where I draw the line, but this is where I draw the line on this. I can't connect with as many constituents as I have this past election and in good conscience approve this. Well, that's part of draft plan later. That's part of this. Fair. But I wanted to move this amendment. I want these things to be reviewed, and that way for future members of council and the people that are moving to these subdivisions, they don't have the same concerns that all of our existing residents have now. Because while I can say that the residents on Country Lane and Loon Avenue, you bought on a wide road, you bought on a road called Avenue, and I will do my best to put planters and speed bumps and radars, I have an opportunity to prevent that from happening now. And so I ask members of council, while it might not directly affect you, to allow this to go through. Staff will review, and specifically the residents of Ward 9 and soon the residents of Ward 10 will thank you greatly for this, so we can address this and have the roads designed in a more safer way for drivers, pedestrians, and residents alike. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Thank you for the amendment. Are there questions or comments around the table? Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Morales, for bringing this forward. And you're right. It's at this point we're approving a draft plan and rezoning, and but I'm concerned that we continue to make the same mistakes that we have made in the past, and certainly I look in my ward, which was constructed many years ago for the most part, and the road allowances are probably just fine in terms of the width, but the pavement is far too large, far too wide, and traffic engineers will tell you that the wider this pavement is, the faster the cars will go. And that's fine in some roads like Georgian Drive where you want traffic to move, but it's not fine in local roads. And I think that's where we really need to have a really hard look at reducing lane widths. And also, I would like to see in all of our reports our bike lanes because you know, mom and dad are not going to allow a 5-year-old on a bike where the traffic is going right by them with a 6-inch wide painted line beside them. That is just not going to happen. And we need to make sure that our kids and our adults are all safe on their bikes. And I think we really need to start looking at every street that's going to have a bike lane. The bike lane needs to be above the curb and separated from the cars. So I'm very much in support of what Councillor Morales has put forward, and I really look forward to a result that will start to redesign some of our streets, and we won't have the problems that we have in some of our built-up areas.
Thank you, Councillor Riepma. Yes, Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall. Maybe just a a comment. So in alignment with Councillor Riepma, I do like the aspect tied to bike lanes. We've heard our active transportation and sustainability committee talk about that and give feedback. In Ward 3, you know, as the example where we've seen the wide historical lanes, right? So without really dipping into capital, we're able to create bike lanes to support some of our master plans and transit routes and active transportation routes. But by far, I think when we look at opportunities where there's development being planned, is to really look at safe infrastructure and a formal division from bikes and cars to support people adopting that type of active transportation mode. So I'd love to hear what comes back and where we can look at changing some of the bike lane infrastructure. While we might have less capital or ability to do that in the developed areas, it would be lovely to see an approach that is kind of factoring in those costs, but for, I think, long-term benefit of the well-being of residents.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Question to staff. I do support the overall intent behind this, but I guess some of my concern would be to confirm whether or not this has any impact on the two new annexation areas, because obviously staff would be fairly deep into the planning process and have already planned most of this out, I suspect. What impact would this amendment have on the work that's already been done? And I know, like in my area, for instance, you've got massive work going on right now at Veterans and Mackay with the widening of the road already.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. I think that's obviously a great point, and that's going to be part of the analysis that staff brings back to you. What I think is important to think about as well is, you know, it's not necessarily about the right-of-way width, it's about what we do within that right-of-way. And so the draft plans are obviously designed with a particular width, and staff would be taking a look at, as I said, from what we're hearing from Councillor Morales, is what happens within that right-of-way. But certainly in terms of how far advanced other draft plans of subdivision are in the secondary plan areas, that will be definitely presented to Council as part of this analysis.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's all my questions.
Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. One additional comment. If the clerk and city clerk could throw up the pictures of the latest email I just sent. I just want to give context to how some of these separated bike lanes look, which I know was one of my points, and thank you, Councillor Kungl and Riepma, for bringing that up. This picture is worth 1,000 words. I'll provide some commentary, Mayor Nuttall, on some of the comments that were said. Councillor Riepma, I do want to thank you. I know we connected a day or two ago regarding this, and I appreciate your support because what I'm asking from you, members of council, is for you to support something that doesn't affect your wards, and you know that's a very altruistic support, because it's not affecting your wards, and it's kind of reinventing this. My hope is that while it allows the secondary lands, the ones that haven't already had the detailed engineering in the draft plan, to be done properly, it will then inspire a culture that will go back to the existing areas, those pinch points in the north end primarily, and we'll say, look, it works so well in the south end, it's creating safer, we get KPIs that show safety has increased, incidents have decreased, and now you have evidence, support, and essentially a test pilot to bring about change in the north end of the city. And at that point, please hold me accountable. I will definitely support it because this is extremely important. And there's not many issues where I get overly emotional, but I cannot design another road width like Loon Avenue and Country Lane. It's just it's unethical. And I just want to show, if you look up to the screen, I want to show you an example. Some of you may remember Hannah Bregman, who presented to infrastructure, and I said, Hannah, find me good examples on why this is necessary, and she quickly pulled them up yesterday. And there's one. I believe this one is in the other one is in Waterloo, the other picture. But this is an example on how you're not affecting the actual right-of-way, but you're essentially providing a diet for the actual drivable space. You're putting the bike lane on the at grade with the sidewalk. You're providing a buffer. It's safer for drivers because they have to be more alert and reducing speed. It's safer for cyclists. It's even safer for pedestrians because you're increasing the clear zone, if you will. So it's kind of an all-win all around. And there's also different designs where you can put the bike lane closer to the sidewalk and put the grass closer to the road so you can preserve snow storage, because I know that's important in the snow belt in Barrie. So there's many designs. And staff, if we could go to number 2, this is an example of a more urbanized setting. This wouldn't necessarily affect some of these collectors in Ward 9, but this is that future vision, members of council, specifically the North End councillors, where look at that, that is in Waterloo. And that's a design that shows kind of how we would look like more in a centralized zone. The trick is when your development is still farm fields, now is the time to do it, because otherwise you're extending the curb, you're pouring more asphalt, and it becomes cost, maybe not prohibitive, but cost challenging. So thank you for the comments of support on this, and hopefully it improves the direction we take, not only for the secondary plan for the rest, but for the rest of the city.
Councillor Riepma.
I don't want to belabor this, but there are 2 other reasons for supporting this. One of them is that cost. Building a road that's narrower just costs less money to build, so it's better for our building industry. And secondly, from an environmental perspective, what you do is you have more permeable land, and so therefore you get better drainage, and from an environmental perspective, it's improvement.
Thank you, Councillor Riepma. Seeing no other comments, there's a few reasons I'm going to support this. Number one, I would say, first of all, from a policy perspective, that I actually moved the motion that I believe former Mayor Lehman wrote with regards to the principles for growth in the secondary plans. And I actually believe everything in here is completely in line with everything that was requested by council. I'm going to guess 12 or 13 years ago for the vision, the projected vision of what the 2 new settlement areas were going to look like. There was some commentary in there about a grid system for roads. There was commentary about this, that, and the other. But one of the major pieces was about creating a more safe and accessible city to the south, where we are, literally creating a new part of the city. And so that's one. I think it falls in line with everything that's been approved by council in the past. Number 2, when it comes to the bike lanes that we have, and I actually moved the first motion to have a bike lane, and it was to deal with the traffic issue in the city of Barrie on Hearst Drive, and it was eventually brought forward back by staff to recommend approval for that, and council did it as a pilot. The problem is that they're just not, as Councillor Riepma said, they're just not accessible to children. Not only are they not accessible to children, I used to bike my kids to daycare, believe it or not. Can't tell today, but I used to. And I had a little trailer on the back of my bike, and I was going on Cundles, Duckworth and Cundles, where the bike lanes are. I had a car pull up beside me and say, basically, you're an irresponsible parent for having your kids on the road. I kind of thought, hey, you know what, there's maybe a point to that. And I stopped doing that, which really undercuts the whole value of having the bike lane there in the first place, right? In terms of safety, a lane, all of those items. And so if we have the opportunity to do it right in the future in the annexation area, I think it just makes a whole bunch of sense. The final piece is schools. For me, for parents around this city, because this is not a selfish thing, I think it's for parents, for homeowners around schools, for traffic congestion, for emergency vehicles to have access around schools, all of the things that happen around our schools in the built boundary of the city, where we have kids dropped off and there's nowhere for them to be dropped off. The school board doesn't create enough space on site. The city hasn't planned for it because it's a school board issue as far as we were concerned. I think that the ability for this motion to say, hey, let's take our heads out of the ground, you know, and look around and say, how can we deal with these items, I think is a really good thing going forward, especially within this one item. And this is why I think it's fine to be attached. In this one item that we're talking about tonight in Lockhart, I believe that there's 2 school sites. So, you know, now's the time to be staking out what we, you know, aspirationally see as what is good policy. And so I hope that staff are able to, our public servants are able to come back with something that, even if it's too late on this one, that does delineate good policy, safe policy, quite frankly, going forward. And Councillor Morales, the only issue I have with anything you said was it's not just Country and Loon. You know, you could have gone on for 7 or 8 other streets just in that area, right? And as you said, it's in every ward of the city. So I think that we really do have to draw the line on this and move forward. So we'll call the vote now on the amendment to the main motion. All those in favor? And it's approved. And we'll now call the vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? And it's approved.
Separate report.
Separate report is being requested by Councillor Morales. Is that being noted, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you so much.
That was the update from the City Hall. Check out our website, YouTube, and Instagram for more stories.